position of a particular author. You can agree or disagree with any author that you want, any idea that you want, but you got to get the idea right first. You first have to understand what you are disagreeing with or agreeing with. Okay, so general rule of thumb, 2 or more major misinterpretations would lead to a low mark, whereas multiple minor misinterpretations would cumulatively add up to a low mark. The length, the next and last major component. This one should be pretty self-explanatory. It has to be at least 2 pages long. It should not go more than 3.5 pages. Use the traditional font, 12-point font, no crazy off-the-cuff fonts, 1-inch margins, so on and so forth. Your video should be at least 6 to 7 minutes. It should not go beyond 10 minutes, so within that kind of range, you're good. And finally, a tip. If you read the perspective of someone that hates you, this is going to be a way that you are able to identify weak points of your arguments and thereby address them, thereby get greater length. And also, if you have accomplished all the other areas of the argument, if, for example, you have quotes and you've explained them, you have an objection that is fully developed, and a separate paragraph of a fully developed rebuttal, generally you're going to do well. You're going to be able to get the 2 pages because you have all these components present. I'm going to end the video with this, what I call supplement section. So creativity. You can earn anywhere from 1 to 3 points in this component if your argument goes beyond the obvious. If you do something, if you present something in a way that makes the reader of yours say, oh, wow, that's interesting. It's a new way of looking at it. I wouldn't have thought that. Phrasing and grammar. A lot of times students complain, they say, this isn't an English class. Phrasing and grammar isn't important, it's just for an English class. Here's the problem. You can lose up to 5 points depending upon the quality of your grammar and phrasing. Your grammar and phrasing either communicates your core ideas well and clearly, or it obscures your core ideas and makes them harder to understand and harder to identify. And that harms your argument. And it harms you both in an academic sense as well as professionally. I can guarantee you, people will judge how you speak and how you write. And if you speak or write poorly, you will be judged as someone who's uneducated, unintelligent, as someone who is not capable oftentimes of doing the job asked of them. So it is important. It does affect you. And academically, it affects you for the reasons I just mentioned. It obscures the point of your argument. Now, there's 2 major ways you can lose points here. Either, everybody makes grammatical mistakes, and I make them, and it's, I'm not going to be a stickler about that. But it's the consistency of mistakes that really matter. Because consistent mistakes either indicate that you got to go back and really work on the core elements of your phrasing and grammar, or it indicates that you're sloppy, you're lazy, you haven't taken the time to proofread, or you haven't given it to someone to proofread. And so the consistency there will lose points. You could also lose points if your phrasing and grammar obscures your ideas. If the reader of you has to go back and say, okay, what were they saying exactly? What do they mean? Because again, that distracts, that disrupts your argument. The tip, have someone who speaks or writes well review your essay. The next supplement, lack of depth. You can lose up to 5 points here. Lack of depth essentially means superficiality. You're not going beyond the obvious. You're not getting into the details. So when you're discussing something in very broad terms, that's where you could lose points. And oftentimes this occurs, and again, this is a tip. If you have 3 major pieces of evidence, 3 separate, distinct pieces of evidence that you want to argue for your points, and you try to cram them all into a 2-page essay, a lot of times that's not going to allow you to be detail-oriented. It's going to leave you being very superficial. So, for example, if I argued that the Sixers are the most intriguing team in Philadelphia because they have Joel Embiid, a potential superstar, they have the best in-court entertainment, or maybe they're just better, more interesting than the other 3 teams. Those are 3 distinct, different ideas. I should develop one of those ideas, and then I can get some real depth. But if I try to include them all, I'm not going to have depth, and I'm going to lose points here. You could also lose points for having too many objections, too many rebuttals, rather than a single rebuttal or a single objection developed fully. Finally, late. So if your argument is late, you're going to lose 7.5 points per week that it is late. So 7.5 points per week that it is late. So get it in. And even if it's late, better to turn it in than get a 0. The final point of this argument is plagiarism. Plagiarism is when you essentially steal the ideas of another, and you essentially steal them because you're passing off these ideas as if they are your own when they are really not. A good tip here is go back and reread your essay or go back and view your video. And if you can't tell that these words are coming from another source, then you are likely guilty of plagiarism. Best way to avoid it is use quotation marks. Use quotation marks. Best way to do it, or if you're doing a video, say, here is the video, or here is the text that I'm using from page whatever. Here's what the author says. When you don't use quotation marks, you put yourself in jeopardy of plagiarism. Okay, so that is the video. That's all the different components, and this video is going to help you review it. You can review different pieces of it throughout the semester for quizzes, but also review it every time that you create an argument. All right, have a great day, and I look forward to the arguments that you'll make.